Welcome to a GeoDict tutorial. My name is Janine Hilden. I'm an application engineer at Math2Market, and in the following video I will explain the material concept in GeoDict. I will show you the GeoDict material database and how to add your own materials. First of all, let's generate a structure. Then we will edit the materials in it. Therefore, up here select a structure generator. I will select FiberGeo, but you can also use any other of these modules. Even if you don't have licensed any of these, you always have the basic structure generator GeoDict. This will do just fine for this tutorial. But I click on FiberGeo. In the module section in the bottom left, simply click on Generate, and a structure is created. Just close the result viewer right now and change to the 3D view with the 3D rendering button up here. We can directly see the materials here in the corner of the visualization area. This is the material legend. There are 4 material IDs present in this structure, as we can see here, ID 0, 1, 2 and 3. And to these 4 IDs, 2 different materials are assigned. Air to the material ID 0 and glass to the other 3. To learn more about the materials, we will open the Constituent Materials dialog. There are several possibilities to do this. One option is right here in the Project Status section. Just right-click on Constituent Materials and clicking on Select Constituent Materials. The second possibility can be found up here in the settings. And of course, there's also an icon in the toolbar for this. Just click this icon here, select Constituent Materials, and the dialog opens. As we can see here on the left, we have up to 16 material IDs in GeoDict, ID 0 until ID 15. Right now, only the first 4 material IDs are defined in the structure and the rest is undefined, and thus grayed out. On the right, we find different material properties, where we can find the corresponding values that are later used in simulations. The next thing I will show you is the material selector. We open it by simply clicking on one of the materials. Then we can use the material selector to change the material of the selected material ID. This works the same every context in GeoDict where you have materials. So just click on glass for ID 1 and the material selector opens here. On the left we find some information about the material. The type, which is solid here, the material name, which is glass, and some additional information. Any information text can be entered here. For the fiber structure, already the information fiber is given, as you can also see here in the material legend. There, the 2 fiber types have the additional information fiber, and the overlap between those fibers has the information overlap. This information is not used in simulations, but can be useful for visualization. Here on the right, all materials present in the material database can be found. Let me just collapse the solid materials here, and now you can see that the materials by default are sorted by type. We have 3 types in GeoDict. Solid for the solid materials, as for example glass, fluid for the fluids in the pore space, as for example air, and porous solid for the solid materials with a porosity. So in the pore space of porous material, also a fluid is contained. The materials can also be grouped by topic down here. And then the materials are sorted in groups like metal, fiber, filtration, and so on. Let's just switch it back to type. And as you can see, there are many solid materials available in the database. You can simply select one of those. Later, I will also show you how to add your own special materials with their properties to the database. What you can always do is select the manual. Then, the properties can be entered directly in the Constituent Materials dialog. This allows you to use your material properties without adding them to the database. Collapse the solid materials again and unfold the fluid materials to see the materials defined for pore space in the database. Now, of course, I also show you the porous materials. They work a bit different than solids and fluids, simply because they consist of 2 materials. We have a porous solid material with a fluid within. Here we can only select between undefined and manual. This is because for porous solid materials, different properties must be defined as for the solids. Of course, you can define your own porous materials and add them to the database. and then they will appear here. For now, just select Manual, and the second panel appears, containing the same fluids as we have seen here on the left. For this example, I will just use air and click OK. Back in the Constituent Materials dialog, we can see that while IDs 0, 2 and 3 are still the same, ID 1 has a new material, air and manual porous. So I just tell you some things about manual materials. For example, here for the solid density, glass has a predefined density in the database and therefore cannot be changed here. But for the manual material, we can enter a value manually. The solid density of air, of course, is not defined, as it is clearly no solid material. In the next step, we have the fluid densities and viscosities, where we have the predefined values for air, while these values are of course not defined for solids. For our manual porous material, the values for the air are also taken from the database and cannot be changed here. To apply the new materials, just click Run, and the dialog closes. As you can see here in the material legend, material ID 1 is now air and porous. Now I want to show you the material database. Again, there are several options to open this dialog. Either use the Settings menu again and click Edit Material Database, or use the corresponding icon in the toolbar here. Also, you can open it directly for a constituent material from the project status by right-clicking on the material and select Edit Material in DB. Additionally, it can be opened at any time from the Select Constituent Materials dialog we have seen before. So just open the Constituent Materials dialog again, and here you can find the button Edit Material Database in the upper right corner. Now we can see here all the materials that are available in the current material database. Again, they can be grouped by a type or topic. We stay with the type grouping, and we can find all the materials that we already saw in the material selector before. If you want to change a material that is already contained in the database, just select it here, and on the right all corresponding properties of that material can be edited. You can change the type of the material and which properties should be defined, and you can change the description down here. Also in the other tabs, all the properties can be changed. But now I want to show you how to add a new material to the database. Therefore, go up here to Add Material, enter a name. I will call it New Solid Material. But you can of course choose any name you want. Then simply click Add, and we find it as a new undefined material down here, below all the other database materials. It will be sorted up here according to the selected material type as soon as it's saved to the database. By default, it is solid, as we can see here on the right, and if we change it to fluid, the second tab here changes to fluid to define fluid properties. Parameters needed for fluids differ from the parameters needed for solid materials. We switch it back to solid, as I just called it new solid material. Below, we could define a material color for the visualization of your structure, and then we could enter some text that can be used to search for them in the database. Next, we can select which properties should be defined. Let's say we want to define some mechanical properties, so just select it here. And then we can see here that a new tab appeared. There we can then enter the desired properties. For this tutorial, I want to keep it simple, so I move back to the General tab and deselect mechanical properties again. But I will change the density in the Solid tab, as for many simulations, this is a required property. We can either enter just one parameter or a list where the density depends on the temperature. To show it to you, I just select temperature, and as you can see, we have one row by default. The number of rows can be changed down here, and then you could enter temperatures and the according density values. But we stay with the simple way, so switch back to none up here, and we will only set a constant density. Now, if you want to add one of your own materials, usually you should know what the real density values are, and thus you can enter real values here. For this tutorial, I just enter 3000. When we have entered all needed values for our new material, we want to save it in the database for later use. So just click Save Database, and the dialog is closed. As we have opened the database through the Constituent Materials dialog, it is still opened here. Now that we have created a new material, we want to use it in our structure. Therefore, click on the Material button for Material ID 1. Unfold Solid, and here we find our new solid material. Select it, and we can also change the information from fiber to, for example, newly created material. Click OK. And here you can now see that ID1 is set to the new solid material. And also you can see that the density is entered correctly here. Click Run to apply the changes to our structure. Look at the material legend now. Here we have our new solid material with the information newly created material. The last thing I will show you is how to reassign materials and material IDs in your structure. Therefore, go up here on Model and select Process Geo. Then, down here in the Process Geo section, from the upper pull-down menu, we have to choose the right command. So we select Reassign. Then there are 3 options for reassignment. The first one reassigns a material ID to another. That simply means that all voxels with a selected material ID will get reassigned to a new ID. I will quickly show you that. Click Edit, and for example, for the material ID that should be reassigned, select ID 3, which is the overlap between the fibers. Then we want to reassign it to ID 1 to only have 2 solid material IDs left. ID 3 is yellow in our structure, as we can see here, for example. If I now click OK and reassign, we see that all yellow voxels became red, as these voxels now belong to material ID 1. The second reassign option is to simply exchange one material with another. Click Edit, and for example, for old material, choose glass. And for new material, you can choose a material from the database. I just select copper. And then again, click OK and reassign. Now all what was assigned to glass before, in this case just ID 2, is now assigned to copper. Thus, this option is especially useful if you have one material assigned to several IDs and you want to change them all the same. The last option, Reassign Material of Material ID, is just the same as we already did in the Constituent Materials dialog before, and it just changes the material of the selected material ID. You can also access these reassign options by right-clicking here on Structure in the project status. Just select Reassign, and then one of the options I showed you before. This is the end of the video tutorial about GeoDict materials and material IDs. If you found this tutorial helpful, please check out our Math2Market channel for more GeoDict videos. Goodbye!